Hey there, welcome back to another video. This time it is a review of what is easily my favorite horror film and my favorite horror anthology, Creepshow. This film is an absolute classic and I love it. I love Creepshow. It's a film that I've done a much longer and in-depth video on in the past. If you want to hear more in-depth thoughts on the film, go check out that older review. I wanted to do a newer review because I wanted to, this October, re-review the Creepshow films. Actually get around to reviewing Creepshow 2 and 3 and the unofficial Creepshow 3 and Tales from the Dark Side of the movie. So I wanted to actually get around to doing those reviews. And I just felt that things would be incomplete if I didn't talk about Creepshow, where it all began. So this is a film that I definitely have a lot of nostalgia for, but I don't think that's the only reason why I like it and why I love it so much. I still think it's a excellent film, even if I take out the nostalgia aspect. I mean, I think even if I saw this years later and didn't have the nostalgic feelings that I have for it, I think it'd still be one of my favorites and probably would still be my favorite horror anthology. Um, because it just gets everything right, if you ask me, when it comes to horror anthology. There's a reason why it's considered by many to be the best of the best. It's got that perfect balance between camp and horror, which is something you need to have in a horror anthology in order to make it fun, to make it truly the most fun you'll ever have being scared. And it's also able to have 5 stories that are all equally really solid. There are some that I like better than others, but they're all good. There's not a single segment in this film that is terrible. And there's a lot of horror anthologies out there where you just have a lot of crap, a lot of shitty stories, and maybe one good one, maybe a couple okay ones, and they don't really ever balance out. I love horror anthologies. I love anthology films, period. It's one of my favorite genres of film because when they do it right, you get multiple short films in one that are worth your while. When they do it wrong, it's one of the worst things ever because you have 5 short films that are really bad, that are really tough to watch. So it just encapsulates and just exaggerates and increases all of the issues that you have with one bad film, and it just doubles down on it. So the anthology is a lot of fun when it's done right, and Creepshow is a prime example of that. Now, I grew up watching this on VHS because my stepfather he is a really big fan of this film, and he introduced it to me. It's one of the first horror films I ever saw, and I remember watching it with him and then also watching it with my biological father and enjoying it at that particular point in time. And I got the film, the 2 disc special edition DVD from a longtime subscriber and friend on here, who sent me this has sent me the 2 disc DVD a while back, and for the longest time that was the only special edition that the film had until Scream Factory made a deal with Warner Brothers and came out with this set last year. And I will definitely say this is the best that I've seen the film look on home video. The transfer on here, the 4K remaster, is gorgeous. The film looks amazing. And this is coming from someone who actually saw the film in 35 millimeter. I mean, I had a chance to see it last year at the Hollywood Theater in a double feature with Cat's Eye, and that was a total dream come true, just to be able to see this film in the theater in 35 millimeter. That was such a great experience and something that I will always cherish and hold on to. And this is a pretty decent set. I will say this: if you're as big of a fan of Creepshow as I am, or if you're really curious about to see more features than what's on here, pick up Synapse's Blu-ray of Just Desserts: The Making of Creepshow, because it has a feature-length documentary of the film on make it the feature-length The Making of documentary on the film on there, plus a few other goodies, including Tom Savini's Scream Greats Volume One, which is all about Tom Savini and his early work. I think up to Day of the Dead, I think, around there. So yeah, that's definitely a must own if you're a fan of the franchise or a fan of the film, or if you're just a fan of making of documentaries. Period. Definitely get your hands on it. It's a great documentary. I might actually do a separate video about that sometime, because it's such a good documentary. It almost deserves its own separate video. But without further ado, let's really turn the page and get right into Creepshow. So Creepshow is directed by Jordy Romero, who is a great horror director, one of the most influential directors of this particular genre. And this is my favorite film that he's done. And I like a lot of films that he's done. I love Dawn of the Dead. I really enjoy Day of the Dead. I think The Dark Half is incredibly underrated. I like The Monkey Shines. Um, but this is my favorite film of his, because it's just one of those movies that I really don't get tired of. Like I could easily watch this over and over again and not get tired of it. It's so well crafted, so well put together. It's so much fun to watch. And Romero's direction is great because it comes from a place of love and appreciation for the EC Comics. And I think another reason why I really love this is it's essentially a George A. Romero and Stephen King take on Tales from the Crypt. And that's my favorite show of all time. I love Tales from the Crypt. I think that's a great show. It's actually saying it's great is an understatement. It's a phenomenal show. It's terrific. And this is their tribute to EC Comics. And it's a total love letter, from the way that it's directed, from the way that it's written, from the way that it's shot. It looks like a comic come to life, even more so than Tales from the Crypt adaptations of Tales from the Crypt comics or other EC Comics were in the HBO series. Like, this is the definitive EC Comics adaptation, if you ask me. And it's not even actually an EC Comics adaptation. It's its own thing. So, and also you have these two legends of horror who unite and band together to deliver a project, and that's really special. That's a special, unique collaboration. I mean, Stephen King and George A. Romero working together on a film. I mean, that's just a match made in heaven, and it's something that is incredibly hard to top, even to this day. So, what I'm going to do with Creepshow is what I do with pretty much any horror anthology that I talk about. I'm going to talk about each segment and give my thoughts on it. I'm also going to talk about the actors and performances and stuff like that, and particular moments that I thought were noteworthy while I'm talking about the particular segments. So there's a intro and outro segment that involves a young boy named Billy. He loves his Creepshow comics, but his father, Stan, he hates him. He thinks this is a bunch of horror crap. And he actually takes away his comic books. And Stan is actually played by Tom Atkins in an uncredited cameo. And man, Tom Atkins is such a asshole in this intro segment. Like, he really, oh man, like, he is such a pain in the ass. And Atkins' performance is great, because it's one of those performances where he totally dives right into the role, and it's very believable that he's just this asshole father who, even in his most fucked up moments, he's so confident about it. after he's, just messed with this kid and takes away his comic books and stuff like that. He's sitting down in a chair drinking scotch and telling his wife, "That's why God made fathers, babe. That's why God made fathers." I mean, oh man, he's such a douche. Um, Billy is played by Joe King, who is Stephen King's son. So even though his acting is really not that great, I gotta be perfectly honest. Like when it comes to the acting, he's probably one of the worst actors in the film, but it still works because it's very tongue in cheek, and you have that added factor that it's Stephen King's son who's playing Billy in this intro segment. So Billy, of course, he's pissed at his father for taking away his comic book. So then he goes up to his bedroom and he starts, thinking about getting revenge on his dad. And then he sees the host of the comics, essentially, uh, the creep, who shows up outside his window and beckons him to come over, and he's ready. And then the opening titles pop up, and the opening title sequence is just, I mean, you rarely see opening titles like this in a horror film. It's animated, and I just love the look of the titles. I love how it opens up with the comic book flipping open, and then you have the creep who comes to life, and then you have John Harrison's just spectacular score, which is one of my all-time favorite scores and one of the best atmospheric, moody horror scores that I think I've ever heard. Um, this film definitely has one of my favorite opening title sequences too. I just love the way it looks with all the comic book panels and the font and everything. It's just such a great way to open the film and to really get you ready for what's to come. Um, the first segment is Father's Day, and it's an original story by King, which was written for the film. It features this miserly, just straight up mean, nasty old man named Nathan Grantham, who all these years ago pretty much made his daughter's life hell. He killed her boyfriend that she was really becoming infatuated with, and she isn't having any of it, and hits him over the head with a marble ashtray. And it's called Father's Day because she killed him on Father's Day. And this guy's such an insufferable prick. He's just like banging his cane on the table. He's like, "I want my Father's Day cake. You bitch, where's my cake?" I mean, it's just like, oh my god, what an asshole. Like, this film has a lot of assholes. I have to be, the more I think about it, like, it really does. Like, this film has a really high asshole quotient. Um, so Joe Lormer plays Nathan Grantham, and he does a good job with that. So Viveca Lindfors plays Bedelia, and she's the daughter who just lost it and killed her father on Father's Day. Well, since the father was rich and he gave all this money to the relatives in the will, the remaining relatives have this celebration of sorts every Father's Day. They have a dinner and a good time with Bedelia to celebrate that moment that made them so rich. I mean, that, like, really, like, Nathan Grantham was bad, but like everyone is bad here. I mean, they're celebrating a murder every year. I mean, they're like celebrating it with fine dining and champagne. So you have this cast of characters who are celebrating Father's Day. So you have Bedelia, played by Viveca Lindfors, whose first name for some reason is something that I have a hard time saying. And you have Elizabeth Regan, who plays Cass, Blaine, who is the wife of Ed Harris's character Hank. Warner Shook plays Richard Grantham, who is the son of I think Sylvia, who is played by Carrie Nye. And you have a few other actors and actresses, like you have Peter Messer, who plays Yarbo, Nan Mogg, who plays Mrs. Danvers. John Amplas actually plays the corpse of Nathan. John Amplas you might recognize from films like Martin, another film that Romero did. I remember when I found that out, I was like, whoa, I never knew that. I never knew that Martin was the corpse of Nathan Grantham in Creepshow. So what happens is Nathan comes back to life. This Father's Day, he rises from his grave and kills Bedelia, and then goes on a murderous rampage. He ends up killing Ed Harris in a pretty laughable way, but it still works to me because it's so stylish and so well shot. And then ultimately, by the end of the segment, he gets his Father's Day cake. In more ways than one. This segment has always been one that I've always liked. I enjoy this segment. I know it's kind of a mixed bag for some people, but I really like Father's Day. My dad and I actually have an in-joke going on with Father's Day. So I like to call him on Father's Day, and quote this segment, and talk about the Father's Day cake. And he quotes back to, "Where's my cake?" It's Father's Day. I want my cake. I want it. So yeah, this is a fun way to start the film. It really does capture the overall vibe of the film that I love so much. It's this lighthearted, campy horror vibe that I think some people aren't super big on, but it's one of those things that's exactly what the EC comics were. They were tongue-in-cheek, and they had moments of genuine terror, but they also knew when to not take themselves too seriously. I mean, look at scenes like Cass and what's that? Cass and Hank dancing to the song "Don't Let Go," like total goofballs. I mean, especially Ed Harris. And it's such a surreal thing to watch, to see Ed Harris, this really super serious actor who's known for these really serious roles and playing these serious characters, dancing around like a dumbass. It's really it adds a whole nother. I'm trying to think of the right word. It adds a whole nother element to this segment that just makes it even more enjoyable. I also thought that Tom Savini's effects in this, especially on the corpse of Nathan Grantham, were really good. And this also had some Michael Gornick's cinematography in this segment and throughout the whole film is fantastic, and so is the lighting. And I love the way this film looks, with the way they use the different colors to create different feelings and different moods and atmosphere to make it. And I love the different panels to make it look like it's a comic come to life. It's such a really dynamic film. It's very pop art-esque. It's one of those films where visually it's stunning. It really is. It's a visually stunning horror film. It looks so good, and this transfer by Scream Factory is absolutely pristine. It is amazing. So yeah, Father's Day is a segment that I've always enjoyed. I like it. I think it's like I said, there are some, there. I mean, the stuff with Ed Harris's character where he just lays there in a he lays there in a hole and just waits for what feels like forever for a stone to fall on top of his head very slowly. But it worked because of the style, and I guess he was scared. He was so scared and petrified that he couldn't move, which sometimes that does happen. Um, but yeah, it's a good segment. It's a good way to start things off. So the second segment is a whole lot of fun. It's the lonesome death of Jordy Verrill. This is based on a Stephen King short story called Weeds. Here you have Jordy Verrill, who's played by Stephen King himself. And King's performance in this is a riot. It's such a hoot. It is so much fun to watch. Jordy, you lunkhead. um, it's definitely the funniest segment of the film, although it does have a really dark ending, but it still is the one that definitely delivers the most laughs. Meteor shit. And I just, it's one of those that really grows on you, and no pun intended, because this one initially, when I watched the film for the first few times, it was one that I was always kind of on. I thought it was kind of goofy and dumb and blah blah blah. But the more I watch it, the more I enjoy it. The more I really like this segment. Stephen King's, aw shucks, just yokel performance is something that is just really entertaining to watch. And I love his daydreams, which feature like the same actor who plays the doctor and plays the university professor and his own father, Bingo O'Malley. I really like that performance by Bingo O'Malley because it's so tongue in cheek, it's so over the top, but you can't help but love it because both of them are just really giving their all with it. $200 for a broken media? I wouldn't give you 2 cents. This is going to be extremely painful, Mr. Verrill. Yeah, as you can see, I've seen this film numerous times. And I like the concept of it. It's simple, but it works. Jordy Verrill, he is some straight up yokel living in a farmhouse in the middle of nowhere. A meteor crashes, and he thinks he's going to get rich on the meteor, but he's a lunkhead and pours water on it, and it breaks. And what happens is there's this liquid substance that comes out of the meteor and starts causing this alien weed of sorts to start growing all over the property. And because he got the substance on his hands, it's starting to grow on him. And it even grows in places where, you definitely don't want things to grow on, like your tongue, or, oh no, not there, or down below in the nether regions. One thing that I thought was worth noting is that he's a wrestling fan, so he's watching what seems like, I think it's an old WWE or WWF broadcast with Vince McMahon announcing, which was a nice little touch there. And it's one of those segments though where Jordy isn't really a prick or an unlikable guy or somebody who deserves the fate that he gets. Everyone else in this film, they all have their own problems and their own faults, but there's not really that kind of flaw in Jordy. He's just a guy who seems like he hasn't really had the best lot in life, and it honestly is something that happens to him that is pretty sad, actually, because the weed eventually takes over him, and he gets turned into this human-plant hybrid at the end of the segment. And then the whole tone of the segment completely shifts from jokey, humorous, ha ha ha, hijinks to, please God, just this once. And then he blows his head off with a shotgun. You're like, whoa, oh my God. holy shit. But that's part of what makes this segment stand out, is because of that. Like it has that sudden brutality and sadness that just makes it so much more impactful. I don't think if it ended any other way, I don't think it would be as strong of a segment. It would be a fun, change of pace, or a moment where things got a little more lighthearted, but it wouldn't have, the same sort of punch as a lot of the other segments in the film have. So I'm totally fine with the ending. It's one of those things one of the things that really grew on me, is the ending, because I remember being like, that's so out of place, I didn't end like that. But the more I think about it, it's a really powerful ending, and it works. And it ties into the title. It's the lonesome death of Jordy Verrill. So, in between all of these segments, there are animated title sequence. Not title sequences in the right word, but animated transition sequences that are. I think the art. I don't know if Jack Kamen did the art. I know Bernie Wrightson did an adaptation of the film in comic book form. I think some of his art might be showing up here, but I think Jack Kamen worked on a lot of the stuff for the comic book sections, which makes a lot of sense because Jack Kamen worked on EC Comics. He worked on Tales from the Crypt. There's even one animated transition where the comic comes to life, where you actually see one where it's like letters to the editors of Creepshow, and they actually reference Tales from the Crypt, which I thought was a really nice, fun little thing, a nice nod to EC Comics. So the next segment is Something That Tied You Over, and this is a really good one. This is one of my favorites. In large part, it's all due to Leslie Nielsen. Leslie Nielsen in this segment plays one of the biggest, just straight up pricks that you'll ever see in cinema. He's such an unlikable piece of shit in this segment, but he's the kind of unlikable that you love to watch. It's because he just is so gung ho about it, and it's also a really nice change of pace for a lot of the usual fare, the usual roles that usually know Leslie for. I was not really aware of Leslie Nielsen's past as a more serious actor. I knew Leslie Nielsen as the Naked Gun guy, as the comedy actor. So seeing him play more serious roles has always been something that to me has stood out. And even among his other serious roles, this performance as Richard Vickers is just especially vicious and noteworthy. It really is. I personally feel it's one of the best performances of his career, without a doubt. And Leslie's the kind of guy who, even though he's playing this just unscrupulous, just despicable person, he's still on the set with his fart machine, making people laugh and making himself laugh, and it's just it's really something that really made Leslie Nielsen special, is that he was able to deliver performances like this and then still be, laughing and farting around. It's and he definitely helped lessen the just tight and probably pretty dark mood that was going on the set with this kind of material. So what happens with this segment is Richard Vickers, Leslie Nielsen's character, he has this sick, twisted addiction to killing people. And so since he's rich and he has this whole beach to himself that he owns, he takes people and buries them up to their neck in the sand and records them drowning as the tide rolls in. And Ted Danson is his next victim, because Ted Danson's character, Harry Wentworth, he made the mistake of getting in a relationship with Richard's wife, Becky, played by Galen Ross. And Vickers is so vicious that he's already buried Becky, and he's just waiting for Ted Danson to fall for his trap, and he does, because he loves Becky and doesn't want anything to happen to her. And they both wind up getting drowned by the tide. But they get the last laugh because they come back to life as revenants and force Richard to hold his breath for a long, long time. This is an episode that has some really great music. I mean, the whole score is really good, but this episode, segment, sorry. I'm so used to talking about episodes when I'm talking about stuff like this. Because I think I'm talking about Tales from the Crypt. But this segment really has some really excellent music by John Harrison. And it really sets the mood perfectly well. The makeup effects of the Revenants is also really well done by Tom Savini and company. The camera work I really liked, especially the off-kilter, askew shots that were used in certain moments. Yeah, this is a really good segment. It's not something that's just gonna tide you over, for a little bit. It's actually something that's quite great and quite good. It definitely has some very eerie, creepy moments in it, and very memorable performance by Leslie Nielsen. Ted Danson does a good job with the role that he's given, and so does Galen Ross, and also just the idea itself of drowning slowly as the tide rolls in with your head sticking out in the sand. You're buried to your neck up in the sand and the tide's rolling in. That's just a horrifying thing anyway. I mean, drowning is one of the worst ways to die, and that's one of the slowest ways you can die from drowning. But Leslie Nielsen plays a really good sick fuck in this segment. But he definitely gets his just desserts at the end. And I thought his acting too was just, I mean, not only just the moments where he's being a sick fuck, but the moments where he's scared, like when he's terrified and he's beside himself by the end of the segment. That was some really great acting too. I mean, I bought that Leslie Nielsen was absolutely 100% scared shitless by what was going on. He was so scared. And it didn't feel like it was forced or anything. It felt and looked like it was 100% legit. So, after that segment is my favorite segment of the entire film, The Crate, featuring Fluffy. Now, for those of you who don't know what I'm talking about, Fluffy is the name of the monster in the crate. Tom Savini even named the monster Fluffy, and it's something that a lot of fans of the film and people who look in the trivia, they definitely know of, that Fluffy is the monster in the crate. I like the design of Fluffy, the big giant teeth. It's like some really demented, twisted gorilla or something, or orangutan. I've always liked the look of Fluffy, and I want a plush. I want a plush of Fluffy. Why have they not done this? Why do we not have a Fluffy? Come on. Let's make a Fluffy. I want a Fluffy. I really do. I really want a Fluffy. So this is based on another short story by King, The Crate. So you have this janitor named Mike. Yeah, poor guy. He loses his quarter under a grate under the stairs, and it was his last quarter for the Coke machine. So he really wants to get that. So and in the process of trying to get his quarterback, he sees that there's this large wooden storage crate that is marked with an Arctic Expeditions label that says June 19th, 1834. He notifies Dexter Stanley, who is a college professor, of this find, and they both check and see what's inside of it. And there's a monster in the crate, and it eats poor Mike whole. Like this seemed like a really kind old man just doing his job at university, living his life, and now he's monster chow. And it's bloody too. Like there's blood everywhere. But this isn't just a segment that works because, oh, you have a memorable monster in a crate. It's also works because it has a great sense of dry, dark humor. Um, there are multiple moments throughout the film. I mean, throughout the film, there are moments like this. But throughout this particular segment, there's a lot of moments which are just, I love them. I love them so much. I love macabre humor, and this is some of the best out there. There's a lot of in jokes. If you think, it's kind of an in joke where I don't know if that's the right word for it. Maybe it's kind of just a joke. Period. So you have the character who would go on to use the monster in the crate to his advantage, who's played by Hal Holbrook as Henry Northrop, and he's got this stuck up, annoying bitch of a wife, Billy Northrop, who is played by Adrienne Barbeau in one of her most memorable performances. And Barbeau just really nails this character. Such a stuck up bitch. She is so when you think of bitch, in the context of a film version or just the ideal bitch, like she just immediately comes to mind to me. Like Billy, a picture of her should be in the dictionary next to the word bitch, because she just personifies everything that you could think of when it comes to a total bitch. She's snide, she's loud, she has no respect for her husband, and she just thinks everything revolves around her. Oh, and the film and the segment knows this, so it has this running gag where Henry has these fantasies where he kills her in various different ways. So there's the one that particularly comes to mind is where they're at a dinner party and she's being obnoxious and loud and just being terrible, and he calls her, and then he pulls out a gun like Dirty Harry style and shoots her in the head, and it's all bloody too. There's blood squibs and everything, and then the crowd at the dinner party, they're all clapping. They're like, great, good shot. Good form. Oh, it's great. It's so great. And it's just this is I think the longest segment, but it still has some good pacing to it because the characters are so well written. The performances are so good. This is one of the segments that really amps up the genuine scares. Like this has some really tense, genuinely scary moments in it. When they're looking inside the crate and you don't quite know what's in there just yet, and then when Mike first gets bitten by the monster, the death of the poor college student guy who was just hanging out on the campus trying to get some extra work done. I think Charlie, played by Robert Harper. Like, I mean, that's such a brutal death. Like, it's slashed in the face, gets his neck bitten off. Yeah, that's definitely one of the more gruesome moments in the film, and really one of the more intense ones. This is another one that has a really good score by John Harrison that really ratchets up the tension. So Stanley, after seeing this monster in the crate eat two people, ate the janitor, ate the student who was staying there, ate Charlie. He's hysterical and goes to his friend Henry and tells him this whole story. And Henry comes up with this idea where he's like, I can make up a story that Billy would buy. I'll go over to the university and I'll feed her to the monster in the crate. I can get a divorce without getting a divorce. I can get rid of her, and nobody's gonna find the body. And this is one of those characters where, yeah, he's not really a good guy, but I don't know. I wouldn't necessarily say the death is justified of Billy, but you know he's still gonna get his in the end, and that's the whole point. Like, these are characters for the most part, other than Jordy Verrill, that have character flaws that are not perfect, and some are really bad people. So, and it is insinuated that he's more than likely still going to get his in the end. So he is still going to get punished for his actions here. But at the same time, you kind of don't blame him. You kind of don't. And it does mess with your head, because you're like, what if I was in that situation? Would I do that? I probably wouldn't. I probably would not do that. But, you know, you kind of can't blame him, though. Like, what an egg. And I love the moment near the end of the segment where he throws her under the stairs to where the crate is. Henry throws Billy under the stairs. And you're expecting the monster to come right out, but it doesn't. There's a delay. And there's a great moment where he's banging her against the crate. And he's like, come on, you know, get her out, you know. And then it's just this awkward pause, this awkward moment where Henry's he's just sitting there dumbfounded that the monster hasn't woken up and eaten her yet. And then she's looking at him like, you know, what the hell is wrong with you? And then she just chews him out, you know, I'm wearing your balls for earrings, you know, just completely, you were no good, you know, in department politics, and you were no good in bed. When's the last time you got it up, huh, Henry? And there's even that moment before that where she, like, hits him with her purse, and she's like, you want to hit something, huh? How about this? How about you want to see some real punches? Huh? And then eventually the monster comes out and eats her. And it seems, it's insinuated that he gets away with it. Eats Billy, chains the monster back up, throws it in a ravine while it's inside the crate. Goes back to have his chess date with his best friend, Dexter. And they both decide they're going to keep it a secret, because what are friends for? But then the monster escapes in the crate at the end, so it's insinuated that they're both going to get eaten. They're going to be the next victims of Fluffy. Fluffy's going to come back and have another snack. But yeah, it's a longer segment, so there's more to unpack and more to talk about. But I don't even mention everything that about it that works. But trust me, this is a segment that really works and really clicks. And it's one that I really love. I love this segment, and then also the performances are just, I've said it before and I'll say it again, they're great. Hal Holbrook, Adrienne Barbeau, Fritz Weaver, they all really deliver just pitch perfect performances for the characters that they're given. And the writing's really solid too, giving them a lot to work with. The final segment is a short but really sweet one. They're creeping up on you. And if you thought Leslie Nielsen's character Richard Vickers was a vicious bastard, you ain't seen nothing yet. Because Upton Pratt makes him look like a humanitarian in comparison. E.G. Marshall is such a joy to watch in this role as Upson Pratt. It's Upson Pratt, but regardless, he probably would chew me out for getting his name wrong. But yeah, this character is so much fun to watch. He's one of those characters that is so over the top in how despicable they are that it's just a riot. It's just so entertaining to watch this guy just be the biggest asshole on earth. He doesn't give a shit whether you committed suicide. He doesn't give a fuck. He just gives no fucks, and I love it. I love the whole. I love the scene where he has an exchange with like a coworker. He took his family to Disneyland, and he calls him up and gets a hold of him while he's on vacation. And he's like, if you don't get the exterminators in here within the span of 2 minutes, you're going to be taking your kids to Disneyland next year on your fucking welfare check. You got that? It's just like, ooh. Ooh. God, this guy is so bad. So, and E.G. Marshall is an actor that he normally doesn't play a lot, characters that are necessarily this mean and nasty. I remember him from Superman 2. He played the President of the United States in that film. So it's such a different sort of role for him. And he did play kind of a similar role in, I think, National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation, but nowhere near the same level of just pure bile as his character in this segment. So he's a ruthless businessman who, due to a hostile takeover, caused one of his associates, Kassenmeyer. Actually, it wasn't an associate. It was a competing business rival, Kassenmeyer, to kill himself. And his wife, Kassenmeyer's wife, even calls Pratt up and is crying on the phone and telling him how much of a horrible person he is. And he's all like excited and happy that he killed himself because that way we don't have to give the old fart a job on the board of directors. And he's playing a small violin while he's listening to her sob story. And it's called They're Creeping Up on You because he's a super germaphobe. So he's in this apartment complex that is supposed to be germ proof. It's all full of like white walls and white paneling, and there's even a special room that he can go into that's sealed away. He has different ways to communicate with people without really going outside. And one thing he really hates and he's genuinely afraid of is bugs, specifically cockroaches. And I think what happens here is karma comes back and bites him in the ass. So there's a blackout that happens, and just cockroaches just start appearing just out of the woodwork, out of nowhere, all over the place. This is one that really gives me the creeps. This segment genuinely gives me the creeps. It is really creepy because there are a lot of real cockroaches that are used here, and I'm not alone. I mean, Thomas Savini and Jordy Romero are on record saying that when they shot this scene, like they were really disturbed and like freaked out by the cockroaches. But small ones, big ones, you name it, all different types. It's just all every cockroach under the sun was basically wrangled up and used for this particular segment. And Pratt gets his in a big way, and in a way that's definitely worthy of someone who is that ruthless and does not care about other people. He's even a racist because there's this superintendent, I think, who, he's given this whole speech about people of color. He's going to do a good job. Played by David Early. And it's just such a horrible person. And it's fitting that he gets such a horrible demise. And he goes in and he tries to escape from the cockroaches into his secret hiding spot in his sealed room. But much to his horror and his dismay, the cockroaches are in there, and there's just a swarm of cockroaches that are all over the bed when he pulls the sheet off, and there's just a whole just blanket, a comforter of cockroaches. And he has a heart attack. And then the last shot of the segment is a real gut muncher. Like it's a real gut churner. Uh, there's a mock-up of his dead body, and then all of these cockroaches just spill out of his chest and out of his mouth, and it's just nightmarish. So that's they're creeping up on you. It's a segment that's short, but like I said, it's really sweet. It's got a great performance by E.G. Marshall, who plays a total asshole, like the asshole who puts the capital A in asshole, and is so enjoyable to watch despite how horrible of a person he is. And then you have the real cockroaches, you have the interesting setting of this germ-proof apartment, you have the blackout that occurs, and then you have like the real just intense insanity at the end with cockroaches just spilling out of his body. It's a total shocker. And after the segment ends, you have the epilogue, the end of the wraparound, and you have a fun little cameo with Tom Savini, who plays one of the garbage men who finds the comic book. And then you have a comeuppance for Stan for being so mean to his son and taking away his horror comics. Billy sent away for a voodoo doll from the comic, and he's using that on Stan, and this is for taking away my comic books, and just sticking it to him, literally. And then it ends, and then we have more of the wonderful score by John Harrison, and it's just a really cool, creepy, fun, entertaining movie. It's a film that, like I said earlier in this review, really balances out the horror and the comedy and the camp really well. And it's a film that, like I said, I could talk about for days. I could talk about this for much longer than an hour. I'm probably not going to do that, though. This is already a little bit longer than I thought it was going to be, but it's Creepshow. Like, it deserves however long of a video that I feel it should deserve or it needs, because it's such a classic film and it means a lot to me. So the film, it's 2 hours, but it goes by at a really good pace because all the segments are entertaining and worth watching. And it was a pretty big hit. It was the most successful horror film for Warner Brothers in 1982. Adjusted to inflation, the box office gross of $21 million in 2019 is around, I think, $53 or $55 million, which is a considerable amount of profit on an $8 million budget. So it's definitely one of those films that did quite well for the time period, and it deserved it. And if you ask me, it deserved to do even better than that, because it's easily one of the best horror films from that year, if not from the entire decade. It's a film that I cannot recommend enough if you haven't seen it. If you haven't seen Creepshow, definitely check it out sometime, especially if you're a fan of 80s horror or you're a fan of horror anthologies. Definitely give it a watch. I highly recommend this set by Scream Factory as well. It's got a lot of good features and goodies and stuff like that. Even has a little collectible book and reversible cover art and everything. This is a film that I just absolutely adore. I love Creepshow. And I honestly don't find really anything particularly that wrong with it, let alone enough things that I could really talk about or even mention to knock it down even a peg, because anything that I might have an issue with is so minute to me personally that it just doesn't affect the overall rating or my overall feelings for the film. So if I were to rate Creepshow out of 5 stars, it gets 5 out of 5 stars. 2 thumbs up, straight up. It gets my highest recommendation and my highest marks. And I'll say it and I'll say it again. It truly is the most fun that you'll ever have being scared. So anyway, thank you for watching my long and in-depth review of Creepshow. I did it again, but hey, it deserves it. So until next time, thank you for watching, and I'll see you later. See ya.